I would like to introduce our keynote speaker. I've had the honor of knowing this woman, my elder, my teacher. My daughter, since she was little, has known Shirley through Trent University Indigenous Studies program. She is Professor Emeritus, sorry, I don't know how to say that, Trent University. Dr. Williams is a member of the Bird Clan of the Ojibwe and Odawa First Nations of Canada. Her Anishinaabe name is 22Oct2017, meaning Eagle Woman. She was born and raised at Wigwamacong, Manitoulin Island, and attended the St. Joseph's Residential School in Spanish, Ontario. Please welcome Elder Dr. Williams to the stage as she tells her story.
Can't see anybody. Which is a good thing, you probably can see me though. Anyway, I thought I was on a panel. Am I the only one that's on a panel? I didn't know I was supposed to speak, but anyway, I'm Shirley Williams, and I'm a survivor of the residential school, which was in St. Joseph's Residential School in Spanish, Ontario. I did not go to school until I was 10 years old. They did come and get me when I was 7 years old. Somehow my father knew that he wanted to keep one of his children at home. So what he told the priest and the Indian agent that came was he wanted to homeschool me, and he would teach me the catechism, which is the catchy sentence. They believed him, but he didn't say in what language. So my school began the next day. We always had breakfast where we made plans, what we're going to do for the day. But at that time it was different. So that morning he talked to my mother, and he said, all the other children that are gone to, our children, they're gone to residential school. When they come back, they don't want to speak the language, and they don't want to participate in the culture. That song sort of got me at the end. So where was I? Oh, yes, so he was telling that to my mother. And then he turned around to me and he says, you don't know why I'm telling you this, but someday you will understand. I want one of our daughters to stay home and know the language and culture. All the others, except for the oldest, one of my oldest brother, he didn't go to school. They didn't take him because he had disability in his eye. So all my sisters and brothers, they all went. But they all told their stories when they would come home, and they would tell me, someday you probably will have to go too. So I knew what was going on there, but I only saw them in the summer. Actually, I didn't even know I had brothers and sisters until one day. They were so noisy, there's so many children. And it is when I found out they were part of my family when I was younger. And they all wanted to maul me. So, and this is when I knew that they went to school far away, and then they would come home. And it started like that. And so from 7 years old on to 10 years old, I did not leave my mother or my father's side. They taught me all of the traditional education, such as hunting, fishing, gathering, and trapping. Medicines, kinds of things that we had to pick, what time to pick, and all of these things. They talked about it, and they only spoke in the language. The last year, when I was turned 10, is when they started to tell me a little bit about the English. Like, do you know your prayers? What is your name? And do you pee-pee? Those three things were very important. I didn't know that, but I did. I found out when I did go to the residential school. So my turn came at the age of 10 when I had to go on a team of horses to town where I was to get on the bus. In that time, there was no highways, but by the time I reached that age, there were highways, and there was a school bus who used to come and pick us up. When I went that morning, I know the night before, I know that my father cleared his throat. I don't think they slept that night. And it was like as if there was death, that there was something going on. And I didn't sleep very well either when I reflect back today. But I did find out that when I went that morning, there was 4 things that he told me before getting on a bus, is do not forget who you are. Remember your language and culture. No matter what they do to you in there, be strong. And fourthly, go and learn about the Inanak and come back and teach us why the Inanak is so restricted to us. Those are the 4 things that he told me. He says, you don't know why I'm telling you this, but someday you will. All these times whenever we were picking berries and whenever I wanted to play, he would always say that to me. Pay attention, my daughter, because someday, how will you know? How will you know when somebody gives you tobacco? How will you answer that? So then I would pay attention then and go to work. So that time that I was leaving on the bus, I was very glad to go to school. I was excited, but I was afraid because I really didn't know what I was going into. When I got to the residential school, that's the entrance. There were 3 things that I experienced. One is the entrance, second was socialization, the third was deliberation. So my entrance at the residential school is the bus was going in and they opened the gate. And when they opened the gate, and then when the bus went in, and after when the bus went in, they locked the gates again. I still can remember that sound when they locked the gate. And I think that's when my heart also locked. From then on, the nun came on the bus and said, give us instructions to tell us how we're going to walk, where we're going to go. I didn't understand English. I only spoke the native language. But the girl that was sitting beside me, she understood English, and she also understood in Schnabbe, so she would whisper and tell me what she was saying. What we had to do was that when we get up, we had to file 1 by 1, and then when you get out, you had to go 2 by 2 and pick up your suitcase and go up 4 flights of stairs with your little suitcase that your mother packed. And then when we got on top of the stairs, there was a big long table. The first girl asked, what is your name? I was so proud that I understood that word, what is your name? So I was proud to say my name was Shirley Fesson. And the second girl, she says, oh, let me look. And so she looked in the big book. And she says, oh, right here, she's number 19. And so, and then she said, whispered because the nuns was not too far away. She says, whenever they call you, you can't answer Shirley Fesson. You have to answer number 19. So I became number 19. And the third girl she had the bundle ready. In the bundle was a long pair of socks, granny socks that the young girls wouldn't wear today. Long bloomers, and they're slowly coming back. And chemise. Chemise are tank tops that you're wearing today. Well, we wore those under. And then from there, the nun asked, do you pee? I understood that again, and I thought. And so she says, tut. She says, or she was really mad, and I was wondering why she was so angry. Anyway, I got to the dormitory. In one section there was beds in there. I don't know how many beds, but there was a section there. But the section was all full of lumps. The bed wasn't very nice. When I looked in the other, there was all kinds of good beds on that side, and they were nicely made. But the bed that I got was very lumpy. And I wondered, why did I get such an ugly looking bed? The bed was made out of straw. That's where they put the bedwetters. So the next day, I got up when there was an inspection. You had to pull your sheet, and there was a wet spot. The girls were scolded, and then had to wash their own sheets that they wet. But mine wasn't. There was no wet spot. So she came to me and asked me again, do you have pee-pee? And of course, I shook my head this way. And again, I wasn't telling lies. And she pulled me about a year. There's an aisle here. That's where she took me. And all the other girls were asked to say something to me. Well, I didn't know what they said because they spoke in English. But I didn't like the sounds what they were making. Here they were told to say something that was ugly, like bedwetter, you stupid girl, all of these things, what they were told to say. So it was, my first experience was humiliation as a young girl. And then for me, I was not telling lies, because there's not one in this room that doesn't pee-pee. So that I remembered, and that was the start. Even before I went to bed, after getting that bed, is they took us to the where the washrooms were and bathtub, and this is where they cut your hair and give you a bath. I tried to tell her that I had a bath, that my mother gave me a bath, but she didn't believe me. And so all of these things that they taught us then began that very day. We were told never to speak in our language because we would be strapped. We were told never to talk about your culture because your culture was witchcraft. You're a pagan. And so this is what we were told. And because we became afraid to talk about these things, we began to be afraid to speak for fear of being punished. So we didn't want to be punished and didn't want to get the strap. So we got a strap if you're caught. And if you're caught, depending how many times, you got a small one. If you're caught more than that, you got the middle kind. And then, the long kind was a big one for bigger sins, such as running away or stealing or fighting or whatever. This is when you got that horse whip, the ones, the cowboys and the Indians on TV that you see, they whip their horses this way and it's long. Well, that's what we got. All of those things, everything was, you saw or something. Being trained and being in an institution, you were never taught to be kind or to be loved. We never celebrated our birthday. It was made fun of us and all of these things. So when you make fun of somebody, it's not very nice. You don't feel very good about it. So I can understand Charlie not wanting to be in an institution where he was not accepted and he was being treated not so kindly. They taught us, they decolonized our minds so that we could reach and go to heaven. I didn't even realize that when they were teaching us about catechism, they always told us that we were pagans and that we were born with a sin and that we didn't have a soul until we were baptized. Well, I didn't even know I had a soul until in 1962 when the Canadian government and the Pope announced that we did in fact have souls. I went home to my father to ask, what they were teaching me. And I asked my father, do we have a word for soul? Do we have souls as Nishnawik? And then he says, he thought about it. And then he turned around and said, yes, we do have a soul. We have a word for it. He said, why? And so I told him what they told me. He says, no. He says, if we didn't have a word in our own language, then we wouldn't have a soul. But we do have a word in our language. Therefore, we do have souls. Don't believe them what they tell you. Just go in there and live to the best way that you know how, because it's only for a time. So all these things that we were trained for so many years while in the institution was they were decolonizing our mind to not to live our culture, to be as a white person, not as a native person. Because whenever they taught us that, I began to wonder if I was Nishnawekwe or a white woman. And then I became to wonder, who was I? Who was Shirley? I didn't find out until I came to Trent University, to really who I really was. I quit school when I was 16. Not that I'm encouraging anybody if they're 16 years to quit school. I love school. I love the education. But I could not tolerate the how we were treated. It was not very nice. And so I quit school, and I promised that I would find work and that I would go back to school sometime. When I told my father and asked permission to quit school, I took a feather oath. He took a feather oath. And he says, here is the first part. He says, we train you in Anishinaabe education. And this side is the school that you're going to, which is the beginning of your academics. Perhaps these two you will need to fill. Maybe this is where you need to fill this. Maybe that's why you're here. So, yes, I did stay home and help my mother. But then, there were other things that were coming in. One day she was sewing away, making teepees, and I was sitting there not doing anything. And she said to me, Shirley, what are you doing? You're just sitting there. There's not enough daylight in a day for a woman to be sitting there today. Look around. What needs to be done? And that sort of made me mad, and it sort of made me wonder, why was I sitting there? Why wasn't I doing anything? Why, what was I waiting for? So I looked around, and I thought, yeah, I could sweep the floor, wash the dishes, carry water, and all of these things they came pouring, which I did. And you know what? It was evening in no time. So my day was full. I began to appreciate, what she told me, but that night I wondered, why didn't I move? It was many years after that I discovered that why didn't I move? Because I was waiting for her to ring the bell. While we were in there, they rang the bell for us to move, to do something. So that's what I was waiting for. But I didn't find it was a flashback of something. I was waiting for her to ring the bell so that I could start to do work. There are a lot of things that really triggers our feelings. I was at the workshop one time. This man was sitting beside me, and he had a pen. And the pen he had in his pocket, and he took it out and he had it in his hand. And he kept on. Didn't make that sound. Anyway, that's what he kept on doing. And that really bothered me. And then I thought, how should I say this, or what should I say to him? And finally, I braved enough, and I touched his arm, and I said, sir, I says, that's really annoying. Can you put, he says, I thought he was really, I was ready to, I thought he was going to really give a good talking to me or swear or something. Anyway, he didn't. He was very kind, and he said, oh, I'm so sorry. And then that night I went home and I thought, why did that bother me so much? Because I've never done that in my life. And so I thought about it, and then, at the following day, it struck me that those clippers, the sound was what they used for us to get up, to kneel down, and to stand up. So those sounds, so sometimes even today, those triggers come back. You never know when they're going to come to you, but they do come. Flashback is something how you were raised in that. Much later on, I went back to school. Little by little, I went through correspondence courses I took in order to get through my self-education. I finished my grade 9 and 10, and then 11 and 12. My parents passed away after, and so I was free to do, and I thought I would go back to school. In this time, I saw a little ad in the paper, and it says Indigenous Studies or Native Studies. And so I thought, hey, that's what I want. That's what I've been looking for. So I enrolled at Trent University in order to go back to school. But I didn't really know why I was going back to school. But I came to find out that I wanted to find out once and for all about the Sinanak. 2 is I wanted to find that little girl by the name of Shirley. And this is where I found her at Trent University, learning about our Indigenous ways of life. When I finished at Trent University, everything was forcing me to go into a language. And so I went to learn because I got a job at Trent University teaching language and culture. Then I thought, gee, it's okay to be fluent, but then how do you teach the language? So I went back to school again at Lakehead University to go learn about orthography, how to read and write in our own language. See, my father knew what he was doing because he didn't let me go to school until the age of 10. So that language was firmly grounded in my brain. So I never lost it. Other kids, when they were 5 years old, 6 years old, they lost the language. And for fear of losing the language, they gave it up, they abandoned it. There's actually something that happens while you're in there is when you choose to either abandon it, you like it or dislike it. It's the I know me stage. And I found that out when I was taking psychology. And so that's where I found out really what the institution did to me. And so when I got the job at Trent University, I was teaching that one day, and my mind went back to the minds of when I was in residential school, where the nuns told me that my language was not important, that I would never get a job, that I would never use it. And so that's what I was thinking when I had my first class. And I thought, ooh, maybe they're turning over their graves. Here I am teaching the language, the very thing that they said it was pagan, And so I love teaching the language because that language is our identity, is part of our culture. It's what restored me. It's what healed me as a Native woman through the institution, restoring that part back. So I believe we have panel coming up now. So I'll just end in 1 minute here because, there's such a long story of things that we went through, but the time that we have here, I'm not able to really tell you everything about really what happened. So my thoughts is, yes, I did go back to school in order to regain my own identity back, to regain what was stolen from me and what was downgraded to be humiliated and being not accepted. I had to turn that around and look for Shirley, that little child that was lost, and then take her back. And that's what I learned from the elders and also other psychotherapists when I was finding my healing journey. So I'll end here, and the panelists will give me questions.